Carillion, because I know there are fears about what might happen if this company goes down. Is the Scottish Government taking any action now ahead of this?
We are very engaged in the issue, and Keith Brown is obviously very focused upon it. We're liaising with the UK government, but we have some assurances about the major project, the Aberdeen peripheral route, in which Carillion is one of the three parts of the consortium. But we're also very concerned, obviously, about the workforce. There's a substantial number of people who work for Carillion in a number of areas in Scotland. So this is a very worrying time for them. It's a very worrying time for everybody involved with the company. We'll work with the UK government, as we should constructively, and work with the company to try and find a way forward on this.
Right, and just briefly, on the Aberdeen project, the bypass, are you saying that that work will continue irrespective of what happens to Carillion?
We understand that that is the case. I mean, obviously, this is a technical issue. There's obviously a great deal of detail in it, but we understand that that work is secure and will be secure, and obviously that's of great importance. And it's importance to the workers on that project, because it's a big project. It's been going on for some considerable period of time.
Now, on Brexit, I'm just keen to get at what the areas of dissension are here. On the Brexit bill, there seem to be two areas. There's detailed discussions about what should be devolved and what shouldn't be. But there is for you an issue of principle, isn't there, which is that Clause 11 of the withdrawal bill appears to contradict the Scotland Act and assumes that powers should not be modifiable when they come back to Britain by the Scottish government, unless that's approved by the British government. Now, what I'm keen to get at is, when Theresa May says she's prepared to make amendments, is she prepared to make amendments to that principle? Is that your understanding?
Well, that is the issue. And of course, it's not just the Scottish Government's position, it's the Scottish Parliament's position. The Parliament's Constitution Committee unanimously took that view in a report this week. It's a view of the Welsh Government, it's a view of a very substantial number of organisations in Scotland, and it's a view of the Scottish Conservatives who've been arguing for this change too.
Sure.
So what has to happen to get to legislative consent is very simple. The UK Government have to amend the bill. They have to amend particularly Clause 11, there are other parts too, but particularly Clause 11, and remove the difficulties that that clause contains. There is no other way for this bill to get legislative consent. We have been promised that. David Mundell promised it last year. Damien Green, when he was in office and chairing the Joint Ministerial Committee, promised it, and it hasn't happened. And that is the problem. And they really have to make sure it happens, because without that, there is no approval. I was speaking at a conference in Ireland yesterday alongside my Welsh counterpart, and we both made it crystal clear from the platform. Without those amendments, there is no legislative consent from either Wales or Scotland, and that creates a situation with the House of Lords, who will have to decide whether they can pass a bill that doesn't have legislative consent.
Okay, what I was keen to get at is you have been having talks with the British government. I mean, what's the problem? Are the British government saying, yeah, we concede the point?
Oh yes, the point is conceded. They just haven't produced the amendment. The Welsh and Scottish governments produced an amendment which we believed was acceptable, joint amendment. First time we've ever done that. We have a raft of amendments to the bill. We put those forward. The Tories then voted it down, including, I have to say, the Scottish Tory MPs voted it down and said they would come along with their own amendment. We said, well, as long as it has the same effect, as long as we can agree it, we'll be happy with that. And it just hasn't appeared. We haven't had that negotiation.
Okay.
No form of words.
Right.
Now, until we have that,
I just want to be absolutely
we can't say whether we'll approve it or not.
I just want to be absolutely clear on this. So, as your understanding is that the British government has accepted the point of principle about Clause 11, that it seems to contradict the Scotland Act, and is intending to amend that clause so it means it restores this idea that powers are devolved and left to their reserve. That's your understanding, that the British government have accepted that?
Yes, my understanding is that they've accepted that point, but they have to now produce the words that show they've accepted the point. Now, for some reason, they're not doing so. For some reason, they're being very resistant in doing so. And they have to do it. And, you know, I'm pleased that Ruth Davidson has made that point. We're all making that point. But that point has to be taken up by the Prime Minister and get some action on this, because it is absolutely clear. Without that, there is no legislative consent.
All right. Something else I want to be clear on. You were, as you've referred yourself, in Ireland. In a speech there, you talked about how you and your government would like Britain and Scotland to remain in the customs union and the single market. And you said that is a minimum for us. But that's not, is this a different issue? You're not saying you'll refuse to pass a legislative consent bill unless we stay in the single market, right?
No. These are not the same issue. In Ireland, in a very wide-ranging discussion with a number of people, including the Arlene Foster and the leader of the main opposition party in Ireland, we were discussing the wider issues of Brexit. And this is also in the context of the paper that the Scottish Government will publish tomorrow, which looks in detail at the options on Brexit that the British Government is bringing forward. The option of not being in the single market, the option of a hard Brexit, the option of this Canada plus trade treaty. And the point we're making is it's bad enough to have to leave, and we don't think that leaving is in any sense a good idea. It's going to be damaging no matter what. But the least bad option is continued membership of the single market and the customs union. That is essentially anything beyond that is going to be very, very problematic indeed. Even that will have its difficulties. But what we're saying is continued membership of the single market, which is perfectly possible. People who have been watching this programme in the last 20 minutes will have heard a lot of nonsense about this in the Labour Party. It is perfectly possible, and in fact, it has to happen in order to protect Scotland's interests.
But this is a separate issue from whether or not you would recommend the Scottish Parliament pass a motion of legislative consent. That's the crucial point.
Yes. The legislative consent motion is a process of negotiation that has been underway since July, in actual fact, and still the Tories have not done what they need to do. And I can't understand it, though it is fairly typical of the chaos that exists within the UK
you said that before.
We've got
lots of things to get through. You have already complained about the fact that these amendments were not brought forward when the bill was before the House of Commons. Given the failure to bring forward these amendments, and given that the Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, promised to bring them forward, is his position tenable?
Well, I think that will be a matter for David, but if these amendments in the end do not come forward in a form that can be supported by ourselves and by the Welsh, then that will be a good question. David rang me on Wednesday morning to tell me that we were in a situation where he couldn't bring them at what is called report stage in the Commons, despite a clear assurance that that would happen. They're now being promised for the House of Lords. Now, the House of Lords is not only unelected, but of course we do not have representatives there. So there are considerable difficulties in this matter. So he will have to continue to steer this forward, but so far he hasn't steered it very far.
Have you identified a peer who can act in your interests in the House of Lords on this, and who is it?
Well, there are a number of peers who are going to speak on this, and indeed I'll be speaking to, along with my Welsh counterpart, we'll be briefing members of the House of Lords over the next fortnight. And there will be peers who will make these points. The legislative procedures of the House of Commons and House of Lords are pretty arcane. There are various stages at which this bill will appear and be discussed over the next couple of months. And at all those stages we'll be doing so. And we'll also be encouraging the House of Lords to bring forward again the type of amendment that the Welsh and Scottish governments drew up and put to the House of Commons, which was actually put by all the other parties in the House of Commons. They joined together to propose the amendments that the two governments had brought in, and it was the Tories who voted it down. So we hope in the House of Lords that there will be a majority for that.
No, Nicola Sturgeon said the other day that the prospect that a second referendum on membership of the European Union might become, I think, irresistible was the word she used, but then she immediately said she wasn't campaigning for it. If it's irresistible, or could become irresistible, why? We also know that your government had meetings with Willie Rennie of the Liberal Democrats who are campaigning for a second referendum. Willie Rennie says he didn't get any very clear response. Why are you not campaigning for a second referendum?
Because it is clearly not the time where that would take place. I mean, at the present moment, there is absolute confusion about what will take place. The three options for leaving, the UK government hasn't even decided which one it prefers. It is quite clear that the EU 27 are trying to be much, much more specific about what was actually agreed last year before they start talking about the trade issues in March this year. So we're not at that stage, but the First Minister is right to say that the people are important here. The people of Scotland, as I think the people of the UK, will require to say something about this. Now, our view is that at some stage we're going to have to address those issues, and we will address them. We'll address them with the Liberal Democrats. There are questions to be answered about what would happen, for example, if Scotland continued to vote to remain and the rest of the UK continued to vote to leave? What would happen in those circumstances? So this is a discussion that is underway.
We're running out of time.
It's not been ruled out, but it has to go on.
Right, you say it's not been ruled out. One of the points that Jim Sillars has been making this morning is that it was a UK referendum. It was understood that the decision of the British people would be accepted. If you start campaigning for another referendum, Jim Sillars said, you could be storing up all sorts of problems if you ever have another independence referendum. What would you say to him? Would you say, Jim Sillars, you haven't understood we're not campaigning for this, or what?
Oh, I would never tell Jim that he hadn't understood something. I would disagree with him, however. The vote in Scotland was so decisively against leaving the EU, 62% to 38%. All the opinion polls show that that actually has grown, the majority against it has grown. That there is clearly a democratic demand in Scotland not to be dragged out of Europe against our will. That's the core issue. And we should not expect people to put up with the dislocation and damage of Brexit without making it absolutely clear that they have the final say.
Mike Russell, we'll have to leave it there. I suspect you're very glad because although it's very beautiful, it looks as if you're absolutely freezing. Thanks very much indeed.
It is cold.